Bonjour, c'est moi, Marc. In 20 seconds from now, I'll teach you the eight levels of dynamic poses to level up your character drawings.
But what do you know, bald guy on YouTube?
First of all, not nice. And I've been a professional artist for over 2 decades, and I've taught for more than 10 years. But you get all of this for free, packaged in a nice 10-minute video. Can you believe this? Wait, did I say free? Alright, class is in session. Pay attention. And I will also be collecting mandatory donations of a like or a sub. I'm watching you. Oh, thanks. That's so considerate. Now, when it comes to the 8 levels of dynamic poses, the order really is just there so that you can start at level 1 if you're not super used to drawing dynamic poses, and go up the levels as you practice more and feel up for a greater challenge. The levels are totally made up, but I've ordered them from the easiest to the hardest. So we're going to be starting with level 1 of 8. Offset. So an idle pose like this, for example, is the least dynamic a pose can basically get. It's symmetrical and stiff. But with the first level of dynamic poses, introducing an offset between the angles of the shoulders and the hips can really help change the stiffness of the pose to something much more dynamic. Because symmetrical things are usually not very dynamic by nature. So the idle pose hasn't changed much yet, but it's a lot more interesting to look at. And that's only level 1. Imagine what's coming next. No need to do that actually, because here it is. So at level 2, we'll just add a direction to our characters to make them look more dynamic. So go from a front-facing pose to one facing literally any other direction. This helps push dynamism further because once again, we're going further away from a symmetrical pose, but pushing this further, we can also have different parts of the body facing in different directions. In the case of this character here, the hands are facing different directions, the head is facing towards the left, the torso is pointed towards the right, the pelvis is pointed at the camera, and both legs are also pointed in different directions. Obviously, it doesn't need to be this exaggerated, but keep in mind when drawing poses, it really helps to spice things up. To be able to do this though, you should first be able to draw the stiff pose that we started with. And I have a class on drawing the body that might help with that. Link down below and in the top right corner of the screen. But yeah, just keep in mind that these are short YouTube classes, so we'll be covering all of this pretty quickly. But if you're looking for more, as in, you know, like a complete art education program from home, everything you would need to learn to be able to draw anything your mind can imagine, well, click the link down below in the video description to learn more about why over 25,000 students have joined my art school program so far. We just hit that insane milestone this week, so to celebrate, the art school program will be on sale for a couple of days at a huge discount. Thank you all so much for your support so far. Now let's get back to the video. So moving on to level 3 already. And as you can see, I separated the levels into 3 different zones. The first zone is for actions in 1 dimension, basically idle poses, like the character is just standing in place. For the other sections, we'll go in 2 dimensions and then 3 dimensions, and we'll see what that means shortly. But to wrap up the first section, we have 1 more level to go, which is going to be adding a new layer of complexity, gesture, like in this pose. So this makes the pose even more asymmetrical and at least suggests an action, even though the character is still idle in the pose. Another way to explain this could be to shift the balance of the character from the center of the body, just slightly away from that. The balance here still works, but now she'll just have more of her weight on the right foot since she shifted her balance a bit, with her left foot just softly touching the ground and no longer really supporting a lot of weight. You can almost imagine she could lift her left foot off the ground and she would still be kind of balanced, so she wouldn't fall. But it's important to mention that this level is only really relevant when the characters are balanced on something, you know, like the ground. If they're floating or falling, obviously it wouldn't really apply. And well, with that, we're ready to move on to the next level.
Wow.
With level 4, we enter a new section, going from idle poses to action poses now. This section will feature poses in 2 dimensions, so up, down, left, and right. No depth yet, but that already sounds a lot more dynamic. So at level 4, we're adding a new layer of complexity once again by introducing full body action. Poses will always look more dynamic when most of the body is involved in the motion. My character here is extending her entire body to reach as high as possible with her hands, where even the head and the neck position contribute to the pose. Another example of an action here, well, the character is jumping sideways, going from point A to point B, captured in my drawing mid-action. Now at level 5, we'll introduce a new way to make our poses even more dynamic, and that would be by using the concept of flow in the pose. Basically, good action poses should typically be simplified as a C or an S curve, or just 1 or 2 curves. The curvier the curves, the more dynamic the pose should feel. And also usually, one of the curves will follow the spine, at least partially. The main force that we're playing with while drawing character poses is gravity, right? We're always pulled towards the ground, so in a way, the ground is also kind of pushing against us. Otherwise, we'd just go right through it like we would in water. And I like to imagine that force as a big arrow, like starting from the ground and traveling through the whole body, like with this pose here, exiting through the fingers. I think the arrow helps us visualize the flow. And then for this other pose, we can feel the push of the ground in her hips, where this side is being pushed up, compared to the other leg. That energy doesn't stop there though. It travels, it flows from the leg to the spine, and then sometimes into the arms. So focus on that to take your poses to the next level. And talking about the next level, level 6 introduces silhouette to the mix. Often a particular pose might make sense, but that might not be the best way to draw it if it makes the silhouette look boring. Or if with the silhouette alone, we're not really able to understand what we're looking at. So a good example of what not to do could be drawing an arm pointing a fist at the camera. Obviously every pose is different, but often it will get a better figure if you can show more of the arm by introducing a slight bend at the elbow, slightly changing the angle. The pose still conveys relatively the same information, but now the silhouette is a lot more interesting. And it reads better as a silhouette too. Not all dynamic poses are aesthetic, but they usually can be when you focus a little more on the silhouette. It's a little harder, but definitely worth it. And this takes us to the last stretch of the video, level 7, and we're entering the final section where we'll introduce a third dimension to our poses to make them even more dynamic. Let's add perspective to the mix first. Characters drawn at eye level will often seem less dynamic than characters with more intense perspectives. Can you imagine we're in this scene where we're looking up at the character? It can make them feel imposing, like in the same way that they'll feel kind of diminished and weaker if we're looking at them from a higher point of view, as if we're holding the camera and we're way taller than our subjects, looking down at them. In this example, the perspective is kind of easy to notice. If you look at her feet here, one is clearly further back, right below her pelvis, while the left one is coming towards us. The right arm is not contributing much to the perspective since it's just going straight down towards the ground, but the other arm, just like the leg, is also reaching in our direction. It's in perspective. But once again, I have another class that might help, so check it out in the top right corner and down in the video description. And for the final level, level 8, we can also add foreshortening to everything we've seen so far. The moment you have any kind of depth or perspective like we just saw, adding foreshortening should instantly crank up the dynamism of the pose. Let's see the same pose without the foreshortening, simply maintaining basic character proportions. It still works, but it looks kind of flat, right? The idea is that whatever is meant to be closest to the imaginary camera that we're looking at this character through, that part of the character should appear larger, and everything further back in the scene should in turn appear smaller. So we understand that both hands and feet are the same size, but they appear to be of different sizes because of the aggressive perspective and, well, the resulting foreshortening. With an actual camera, you would get this kind of foreshortening effect if you were really close to the subject, as the photographer. If you're taking a photo from really far away, it would instead appear flatter, like the version without foreshortening. So the foreshortened version gives us the impression that we're right into the action, real close to the character. And, well, that's very dynamic. We've come a long way from where we started here. And I also have a class on foreshortening, so link below with all the rest. So anyways, here's all the levels that we talked about today. So try your best to apply these things and your character poses should be super dynamic. If you're experienced enough to draw dynamic poses from imagination, that's great. But for most of you out there, don't hesitate to use references. References are your friends. I'll actually add another link in the description down below for where I get all my photo reference packs. Check it out. And that's gonna be it for today's class. So to congratulate you for listening until the end and gaining a ton of XP for your dynamic pose drawing skill, well, you can grab my popular custom brush set for free with yet another link down below again. The brush I used to sketch today is even included. It's the best, let's be honest. And now make sure you have notifications enabled to be on time for next week's class. If you learned something, let me know to keep making weekly videos by commenting down below and also paying the class fee if you still haven't. And don't miss out on the big sale for my art program.